Hi, I'm Rhonnie. It's nice to meet you. Do you ever feel like people don't know who you are in a room? I mean, you're there, you're part of the conversation, and things are happening, but they really don't know who you actually are. Sometimes that happens to me. I mean, when I walked out here, for instance, did you look at me and say, wow, she's disabled? How about you? Don't worry about it. I don't see myself that way either. I've never woken up one single solitary morning and thought to myself, wow, today I'm disabled. What should I do with my time? Well, in 2005, 2 weeks after giving birth to my youngest daughter, I suffered a massive stroke. I also had a 9-year-old at that time, and as a result of my stroke, I was unable to walk or talk or do some really basic things like go to the bathroom by myself. At that time in my life, I was at what I thought was the pinnacle of my career. I was running the Western divisions of a Fortune 500 company, and quite frankly, this little girl from South Central LA had thought she'd made it, and nobody could tell me any different. So in this situation, if you can imagine the vulnerability and the feeling of loss of not even being able to take care of your new baby, let alone be able to be the supporting mom that I wanted to be to my older daughter either. But that wasn't even the totality of the things that I was going through. I mean, I couldn't talk to anybody. So as you can imagine, I had a whole lot of conversations with God. And most of them started with, Lord, if you just get me through this. I made tons of promises and tons of plans, and I'm sure some of you in this room have had that same conversation. I mean, it may have been after a night of drinking, but, it starts the same. So during this time, I was holding on to my faith. I mean, really clinging to my faith. And I said, when I get better, I'm going to go back out here. I'm going to get back into the workforce. And I am going to do the things that I was working towards before this happened to me. So as you can imagine, my employer checked in from time to time on my progress. They would call, and my grandmother would say, baby, she can't even talk to you right now. I don't know when she's coming back to work. And we could tell that my employer was slowly becoming more and more impatient, right? I mean, after all, they do have a business to run. So eventually, when I regained the ability to speak, I had to tell them that I didn't know when I was going to be able to come back to the workforce. I mean, I was still having all kind of weird and crazy things happen. I mean, your brain controls everything. And a vein in my brain had burst and was bleeding even 6 months after the original stroke. So randomly, I might wake up and I can't see. I'm going to take a moment to tell you guys a quick story. One morning, I woke up and I started to scream. And there's a lady there who would come in and she helped me from time to time. And she says, what's the matter? And I'm like, I'm paralyzed. And she said, no, you're not. I'm like, yes, I'm paralyzed. She said, no, you're moving your arms, so you're clearly not paralyzed. And I was like, oh. And she said, well, what's wrong? And I said, I can't see you. And she's like, girl, you're blind. Relax. And I'm like, what? So we went to the eye doctor, and he gave me some drops, and eventually my eyesight came back. But all those things are controlled by your brain. So when you have trauma to your brain, it takes some time for it to recover, and you never know what's going to happen from day to day. So I couldn't really give my employer a definitive answer of when I would be back because, quite frankly, I didn't know. And I'd not given up hope. I just knew that it was going to take me a little bit more time. But I was determined. And so when I did get better, I went out into the big, bright world in my smartest suit with my best resume and my biggest smile. And on the other side of the table, they were looking at me and thinking, is this lady going to stroke out on my job? Is she going to get hurt, and are we going to be liable for this? And I knew that this is what they were thinking, right? I mean, it stands to reason that they should at least question what's going to happen if they give me this employment opportunity. So with that being said, I applied for job after job, went to interview after interview, but nobody would hire me. And so then I had to assess my skill sets. Now, luckily, I could cook. My grandmother and my great-grandmother had always put me in charge of desserts on all the holidays. It wasn't great for my figure, but it really did boost my skill set. So I started cooking. First, I cooked anything anybody asked me to cook for money, and then eventually I realized that baking was my niche. So I became addicted to Food Network. I learned how to use fondant and do 3D cakes, and I was lucky enough to be on the path of entrepreneurship, which has led me to many wonderful things that I probably would not have explored had I been back in the workforce in the traditional manner that I was before in my corporate America job. So I am grateful for that, but there are a lot of people who are not as lucky as I was. And so you ask me, what do these people look like? Well, they look like the mom who decided not to go back to work right after she had her children because she wanted to spend time with them. Yes, they do look like reentry candidates that are coming back and wanting to assimilate back into the workforce. And they might even look like veterans who are transitioning out of the military and they need to get into civilian work life, right? They really look like anybody who has an unexplained gap in their employment, or maybe something on their resume that doesn't quite jive. So before I leave here today, if I can, I'd like to ask maybe you and maybe even you a favor or two. I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is peel back the layers of the onion. I want you to start to pull back all those things that make you who you are until you get deep down to the most vulnerable part of you. Oh, you know the part I'm talking about. The part that you don't want people to know about, that you're hoping nobody asks when you go into the interview. Yep, that's the part. I see it in your face. The second thing that I'm going to ask you to do is imagine you walking into that interview and having to lay that piece on the table and live in that space and understand what that feels like. And the last and final thing that I'm going to ask you is actually a little bit more of a favor. And I feel like we've gotten pretty close. I mean, I just told you all of my business. So since we're friends, if I could ask you one favor, it would be that the next time a resume or application comes across your desk that's less than perfect, take the 5 to 10 minutes that it takes to call that person and give them the opportunity to explain. Thank you.